Hello! We're glad you've joined us for this live webinar, Preservatives Now, Facts and Fictions. I'm Brenda Kelly Kim of LabRoots, and I'll be moderating this session. Today's educational web seminar is presented by LabRoots, the leading scientific social networking website and provider of virtual events and webinars, advancing scientific collaboration and learning. It's brought to you by LabRoots. To learn more, please visit www.labroots.com. Let's get started. You can pose questions to the speaker during the presentation while they're fresh in your mind. To do so, simply type them into the Q&A box, which will open when you click the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. Questions will be answered after the presentation. To enlarge the slide window, click on the screen icon in the lower right-hand corner of the slide window. If you experience any technical problems seeing or hearing this presentation, just let us know by clicking on the support button found at the top right of the presentation window, or you can report your problem by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left. I'd like to now present today's speaker, Dr. David Steinberg. With more than 30 years industry experience, David is a world-renowned industry expert whose preservative knowledge is second to none. He founded the Master's Program in Cosmetic Sciences at Fairleigh Dickinson University and has taught many courses including Chemistry of Skincare, Chemistry of Hair Care Ingredients, Cosmetic Raw Material Regulations, and Preservatives for Cosmetics. For more than 15 years, he wrote a bi-monthly column for Cosmetic and Toiletries magazine. In 2006, he founded the Cosmetic Preservative Council and served as executive director. He is a Regulatory Affairs Professional Fellow and has served as chapter chair, national treasurer, and national president of the Society of Cosmetic Chemists. He is on the board of directors for the Independent Cosmetic Manufacturers and Distributors Industry Association. He has received many awards, including Eminent Visiting Scholar, Virginia State University, Paper of the Year, Australian Society of Cosmetic Chemists, and Society of Cosmetic Chemists Merit Award. He is a featured speaker at many industry events and always provides a unique perspective many find invaluable. Let me turn you over to David now.
Thank you. Today we're going to be talking about cosmetic and personal care preservatives, what is happening. What I like to say is facts and fiction. You're going to hear a lot more fiction than you are going to be hearing facts, because that's what's happening to our world right now. And I would like to start off by answering the question that I always get asked, and what is Fraps? No, it's not something that Starbucks got rid of. Fraps stands for Fellow, the Regulatory Affairs Professional Society. I am the first person who was elevated to this status who specializes in topical pharmaceuticals and cosmetic regulations. So much for that. Where did our preservative problems begin? They started in a different vein in the early 80s when a distributor, a very minor player in UV filters, went to one of the small players and said, "We'd like to make you an offer. Give us the exclusive rights to sell your filter for 10 years at a healthy commission rate, and we're going to make this the #1 selling UV filter in the world." Well, they got the agreement. At that time, the most common filter was Parabens O, which goes by the inky name of ethylhexyl dimethyl PABA. And although it doesn't contain PABA, it's not made from PABA. Their biggest selling point for their UV filter was the negative properties of PABA itself. PABA itself is very rarely used as a UV filter because it's too water soluble. It stains fabrics. And probably the most important thing is it doesn't work unless you apply it at least 30 minutes before you go out in the sun, which to me sort of seems strange, because if you do that, then every 2 hours you have to go back inside for a half an hour and reapply. Anyway, guilt by association led to the term PABA-free, and suddenly the free claims became a universal way to market products. Now, each time someone comes up with a new free claim, I get calls from the press, and they usually ask the same questions. How many people did you kill or injure before you removed this horrible chemical from your product? And the answer is always none. That doesn't stop them. They then say, what other toxic chemicals are in your product that you haven't removed yet? And then the last question, which is the deadly question for our industry. Shouldn't the FDA pre-approve all cosmetics and all ingredients that go into cosmetics? Because clearly self-regulation is not working. So what do we find? Go to the shelf of any store and you're going to see PABA-free, triclosan-free, formaldehyde-free, glycol-free, preservative-free, alcohol-free. Everything's free except the price. Now, Advertising Standards of Canada, that's part of the government of Canada, considers free claims to be inherently false and misleading. So let me give you some of the comments and how they deal with it. And we're going to use as the example hydrogen cyanide free. Good chemical not to have in our products. And they've issued conditions which must be met to make such a claim. And the first thing is you must have used this ingredient in your product and that it was sold in Canada and that it was properly registered and the dates it was started to be sold in Canada. You make the decision you're going to remove it, so you must notify the government that you have removed this ingredient from your product. You also must show outside analysis that there is non-detectable amounts of this ingredient in your product. And if you meet these conditions, you're allowed to make this free of claim for 1 year. But at the end of 1 year, any product with this free of claim must be removed from the shelf. No sell-through, which has led to the retail outlets saying when your people come in to market your product and it says hydrogen cyanide free, they don't want it on your shelf because they will be responsible for getting it off the shelf in 1 year and returning it to you, and that's not what they want to do. Now, when Canada came up with this standard, it applied to everything, and there are some very important questions raised about what can we say because it's important to warn consumers about things. So they allow claims like this product was never formulated with hydrogen cyanide. This product naturally contains no hydrogen cyanide. We do not have hydrogen cyanide in this product. Now, all these claims must be true and you must prove them if you're going to make these comments. It wasn't hydrogen cyanide that caused the question. The question really was from the food industry about sugar for people who are diabetics, who needed to know whether there was sugar in the product. Well, marketers are quick to follow through on saying free of anything that will sell one more bottle and frankly don't care about the consequences. Of importance to the people who export, England and France have prohibited free claims for personal care products, and they have requested a formal part to make this part of the European regulations. I believe it will pass within the next 2 years. Now, when you go to formulate, does your marketing department restrict you? I do a lot of ingredient reviews for many different cosmetic companies, and each one seems to have a list of prohibited chemicals, which we just call the no-no list. And some of the most common are parabens, products that contain chlorine or iodine, products that are made from ethylene oxide, formaldehyde, the isothiazolones, glycols, alcohols, acids. That just about covers all our preservatives. I don't think there's anything that they like. So why do they do this? It's because the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, have been attacking chemicals for years, and they have found a lot of focus and attention on preservatives. You need to understand that their goal is not safety, but it's money. They do this by trying to scare people. And they do this because they have two great friends who help them do this. The first is the media, whether it be television or the internet or radio or newspapers or magazines. The media is quick to publish whatever the NGOs say without checking the facts, whether it's true or, even more important, whether it's really relevant. And this is followed by the marketers of cosmetics, who as soon as they hear, oh, parabens are bad. We're going to take all the parabens out of our products and become paraben-free. When this first happened, I was asked by one company what to replace the parabens with. And I said, let's be very realistic about this. How many products do you have with parabens? And he said, over 1,000. I said, and how long will it take you to take the parabens out, put something else in, test for, see whether they work, do the safety over again, do the stability over again, do the claim substantiation over again, repackage and relabel your products? And he said, an awful lot of money. And I said, and where's your budget for this? So I said, why don't you go back to marketing and say, this is what it's going to cost. Could you please give me a budget for this so I can hire enough people so we can do this? Because it will take me, working in my lab right now as I'll be able to do about 6 products a year. And we have over 1,000 to do. He says, they'll fire me if I say that to them. And I said, good, I'll be an expert witness for you for a false firing lawsuit because you told them the truth. So we sent it to them, and he called me up a minute later. They said, don't use parabens in any new products. Don't reformulate. So that's what happens to us. Who is the Environmental Working Group? Let's just look at their mission statement. The mission of the Environmental Working Group is to use the power of public information to protect public health and the environment. That sounds nice. Go to their website, and the first thing you see is they want money. Contribute now. Forget about everything else. We just want your money. The first preservative that was really successfully attacked was parabens. And this has been followed by triclosan and Quaternion 15, the isothiazolones, formaldehyde releasers, acids, glycols, phenoxyethanol, and just about everything else we use. So let's look at the facts and the fiction about parabens. The first paper attacking parabens was a Japanese paper published in 2005 that said feeding huge amounts of parabens to rats resulted in around a 10% reduction of the rat's sperm count. I guess if it was higher than that, we could sell it as a rodenticide. Did this mean anything? No, because we don't eat cosmetics, so ingestion of parabens is not a really interesting topic. It went nowhere. It was followed shortly thereafter by a very broad European paper talking about endocrine disruptors, and they came out with certain structures, and they said these structures have the possibility of maybe being endocrine disruptors. The FDA looked at this paper and did some testing and published, and you can find it on their website, that the paraben that has the highest endocrine disruption potential is butylparaben, and that is 1/100,000 as potent an endocrine disruptor as estradiol, which is a true endocrine disruptor. So all this nonsense about endocrine disruptors is just that. It's fiction. Then came the paper in early spring of 2006 by Darby from England, who found breast cancer tissues and found parabens in them. She attributed this to the use of parabens in underarm antiperspirants. That was rather strange. We've never put parabens in underarm antiperspirants. Also, how do parabens get from the underarm to the breast to cause breast cancer? Actually, there were 2 important questions that the author never wanted to discuss. The first was, were the patients that she tested on chemotherapy? I find this to be a very critical question because a lot of the chemotherapy drugs are preserved with parabens. And the second thing is, if they were on chemotherapy, one of the major side effects of the chemotherapy, besides loss of hair, is while you're getting the stuff poured into your veins, you feel terribly nauseous. And the answer is liquid antacids. And all liquid antacids are preserved with parabens. Well, about a month later, the author changed her mind. But by then, it was too late. In a six-week period, It was all over the news that parabens cause breast cancer, which is just nonsense. First, her controls had higher paraben levels than the tumors that she found in the subjects. The second thing was, how many subjects did she test? The number was 8. That's not significant. That's just ridiculous. So, but it caught on. So what has happened? We're probably going to lose the C3, the propyl and the butyl parabens. They're the least effective, so I'm not going to lose too much sleep about it. Already the European Union has said that you cannot use the C3 or C4 higher than a total of 0.19 individually or combined. The isoparabens, isopropylparaben, isobutylparaben, and benzylparabens are no longer permitted in the European Union. Okay, the truth is we've been using parabens for over 80 years in cosmetics, some foods, drugs, and it's really safe. There's no real science that says parabens are anything but safe. In fact, they are probably the safest preservatives we can use. They certainly are the most safety tested. The European ban on the isoparabens was not because they were unsafe, it was because they weren't supported. They requested scientific tests, which would cost more than the annual sales total in the world of the isoparabens. So the manufacturers of the isoparabens just said, we're not going to spend that kind of money. That's ridiculous. We'll never get our money back on this. So it is now on their Annex 2 prohibited list. There are a lot of things that are on the prohibited list that are really not unsafe. They're just not supported. I think they should change their list to what is unsafe and what is not supported. In the United States, the Cosmetic Ingredient Review reviewed this again and again and again. They disagreed with the European Scientific Committee's findings, and they continue to say that the parabens and the isoparabens are safe as they are currently used. What about triclosan? Everyone hates triclosan now. The most common thing I hear is that it's a pesticide. Well, yes, it is, because triclosan has many industrial applications. Industrial applications require approval by the Environmental Protection Agency under FIFRA, and the end result is that EPA classifies as part of FIFRA anything that is a preservative is a pesticide. So yes, it's true, but is it meaningful? And the answer is no. They say that it contains chloroform. There's never been any found. They say it contains dioxin. Now, dioxin's a real bad actor. Dioxin is the major ingredient that was in Agent Orange. However, triclosan has extremely tight USP specifications, and the amounts of dioxin that are allowed are in the parts per billion range. They claim it's an endocrine disruptor. There's no evidence that this has happened. You constantly hear that it causes antibiotic resistance. The first paper is what they usually cite, and no one's ever been able to duplicate the work of the first paper. There is no technical proof that triclosan causes antibiotic resistance. It's just another one of these science fictions that we hear all the time. The real facts are that we don't use triclosan as a preservative. It has a very narrow activity range, and that's against some gram-positive bacteria. It does find use in cosmetics, in underarm deodorants, not antiperspirants, and the only people who use underarm deodorants are men. So the volume of triclosan for cosmetic use is extremely low. However, its big use is in drugs, especially in our industry, in over-the-counter soaps and cleansers and body washes, which all fall under the category of antimicrobial body washes. The FDA, approximately, it's almost 2 years now, went into a consent decree from a lawsuit in which they have set up a timetable, and it is very possible within the next year to 2 years, you will see that antimicrobial soaps, liquid cleansers, and body washes no longer be allowed as OTC drugs in the United States, that you will not be able to make the claims. Probably a year after that, you will see the same for the leave-on products, which are usually emulsions that contain a quaternium compound. And then a year after that, they will come out with what they're going to do with the alcohol-based hand sanitizers. And that will probably remain, although I suspect they might limit its use for professional use in restaurants, in washrooms, in public areas, things like that, but not for home use. It's not that useful. It kills the bugs on your skin real quickly. But after it evaporates, about 5 minutes later, they're right back there. So the long-term effects are very nil. Okay, the latest one to meet the wrath of the NGOs was Quaternion 15. This preservative was the original preservative used in Johnson & Johnson's baby shampoo and similar baby shampoo products, generic ones and other producers. It also found use in preserving mascaras. It was very active against gram-negative bacteria. The Campaign for Safe Cosmetics, which happens to have the exact same officers as the Environmental Working Group, started attacking Johnson & Johnson in 2009 and finally launched a video called The Toxic Tub on the internet. The mainstream media picked this up immediately, and the Toxic Tub basically said that baby shampoo contained Quaternion 15, which causes cancer. Not true. It contains 1,4-dioxin, which causes cancer. Not true. They just kept on attacking it for various things. Okay, so what happened is that J&J capitulated. This resulted in a new, I guess, word in our vocabulary, because the NGOs have threatened other major cosmetic companies who don't do what they would like them to do, and they have threatened them with things like, we will toxic tub you. We will come out with the same thing, but we will attack you instead of J&J. One company who was faced with this issue promptly sent them a letter from their lawyer saying, you do this and you will be in court for the rest of your life. The facts are J&J has significant safety data on baby shampoo going back from when they first started working on it. But the marketing pressure, which included a significant amount of spam letter writing, just was too much, and the marketers of baby shampoo surrendered. So they took the Quaternion 15 out, and they took out all the other ingredients that they disliked and reformulated. With this loss of the major business, the manufacturer, Quaternion 15, decided not to support its use in any more cosmetic applications. It is used under a different name for industrial purposes, and as a result, the EU proposed this year to remove it from their Annex 5 positive list of preservatives, and the manufacturer said, we're not going to support it for cosmetics anymore, so this is destined to hit the Annex 2 prohibited ingredient list. So if you're using Quaternion 15 and you're exporting to Europe, you'll need to reformulate. The other thing is that once this becomes official in Europe, there are many other markets that follow the European Union regulations, which include Latin and South America, the Middle East, the Asian PAC countries, New Zealand, Turkey, Russia. The ones, it's easier to name the countries that don't follow it, which is the United States, Canada, and Australia, Japan, Korea, and that's about it. That leads us to formaldehyde. Formaldehyde refers to the anhydrous gas. It mixes with water and it gets converted to a compound called methylene glycol. The American Chemical Society recognizes these as two different chemicals with different CAS numbers. The methylene glycol is so common, it's in every cell of our body in small amounts. And whenever you exhale, you are releasing some of this into the atmosphere. When we used formaldehyde, which was back up until the 60s or early 70s in cosmetics as a preservative, Typical concentrations, 1/10 to 0.2%. The big objection was it was a sensitizer. Yes, when left on the skin, it does cause low levels of sensitization. When used in shampoos and conditioners, wash-off products, this is not the case. Because of this, products that release very low levels of formaldehyde were discovered and marketed. They are much safer. They don't give you the sensitization, and they give us the best protection against gram-negative bacteria in all types of formulations. Very important issue we'll have to deal with in a couple minutes. In the late 70s, early 80s, the first introduction of the mixed isothiazolones came to the cosmetic industry. This was a 3-to-1 mixture plus salts as stabilizers of the methylchloroisothiazolone and the starting material, the methyl isothiazolone. And these are abbreviated MCI and MI. The combination was sold with the recommendation. The maximum use level was 15 parts per million of the active ingredients and recommended for wash-off applications only. In Europe, they used it in leave-on applications at levels like 30 to 90 parts per million and promptly sensitized a tremendous amount of the population. They stopped doing that and the issues really disappeared. The methyl isothiazolone was offered alone about 10 years ago, and it was suggested for leave-on applications along with wash-offs because the methylchloroisothiazolone was the major sensitizer based on all the data. It was approved in Europe and was one of the first new preservatives approved in Japan after Japan changed their cosmetic regulations. Maximum level was 100 parts per million. Most people used it at 95 parts per million. Why? It was sold as a 9.5% solution in water. You add 0.1%, you're putting in 95 parts per million, and it worked. In 2014, it was named the Contact Dermatitis Sensitizer of the Year. This got a lot of press. It's strange. The press never said anything when cocamidopropylbutane was named the Contact Dermatitis Sensitizer of the Year. You can see where their issues lie. Preservatives are great whipping boys. Because of all the issues that have come about, two things have happened. The European Union has reduced the maximum level from 100 to 15 parts per million and for wash-off only. The facts are the Cosmetic Ingredient Review was very much aware of what was happening with this. And they also looked and said, you know, if we ban this because it's such a sensitizer, we don't have too many preservatives that marketing is allowing anymore. So this year they concluded that the methyl isothiazolone was safe, again, up to 100 parts per million if you formulate your product to be non-sensitizing. It's very possible that the methyl isothiazolone will work in your formulations, depending on what you have in their type of formulations, inhibitors, things like this, in the 25 to 50 parts per million range. And as a result, you might find that you can use it and not be a sensitizer. However, the damage has been done, and the manufacturer says they're not going to recommend this for leave-on products anymore. If you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. Okay, what are our other preservatives that are being attacked? We use glycols, the C5, C6, C8, some C10, and these are 1,2 diols. This is where you'll find the caprylyl glycol. We'll talk more about that later. There's some sensitization. It's nothing to worry about. It's in about the same level. We have sensitizations to things like the parabens, which are some of the least sensitizing things on the marketplace, things like that. However, the NGOs are attacking them as being toxic chemicals. Why? Well, ethylene glycol, which just had the honor of going on Proposition 65 for reproductive toxicity by ingestion, its inky name is glycol, Okay, says, well, you know, these are all glycols. If ethylene glycol will kill you, so will these. And guess what? The press listens to them. No one ever challenges these types of stupid remarks. The press doesn't try to see if they're true or not. They just go right ahead and attack them. The interesting fact about these are none of these are approved as preservatives in any country that has a positive list of preservatives. The United States and Canada does not have a positive list, so we just go ahead and sell them. If you ask the sellers of these products, they say, well, they're moisturizers or they're something else. And by the way, they make your emulsions antibacterial. Strange. Okay, benzoates. This is one of the interesting ones. It goes back about 10 to 12 years ago, and it was linked to a reaction of sodium benzoate with ascorbic acid, or benzoic acid with ascorbic acid, to form benzene. Now, this didn't happen in cosmetics. This happened in a very popular water beverage known as Perrier. And I taught organic chemistry over 50 years ago. I have never figured out how you can react an acid, a cyclic acid like benzoic acid, with a complex acid like ascorbic acid and form a hydrocarbon. It can form it by reducing them, but they don't react to form a reducing agent. So I never understood this. As to Perrier, they finally found the source of the benzene was not from the Perrier. It was coming from the lubricant that was being used in the chain belts on the assembly line to bottle the Perrier water. No one remembers that anymore. One of the other current whipping boys that we have to deal with is our favorite preservative right now, and that's phenoxyethanol. Phenoxyethanol has always been hated by the French because it is a 1 mole of ethoxylate. Now, 1 mole of ethylene oxide on methanol or in ethanol or those very short-chained alcohols form solvents that are never used in the cosmetic industry, who are extremely carcinogenic and toxic, and they're not nice things. So that's why we don't use them in cosmetics. They don't have any utility. The paint industry uses them. I don't care about the paint industry. We don't use them in nail polishes. Don't worry about that. But this leads us to what does this mean? Well, the French said if 1 mole ethoxylates of short-chain alcohols are bad, all 1 mole ethoxylates are bad. They have proposed to the European Union to restrict its use from 1% to 0.4% for children's products 3 years and younger, prohibited in the Nappy areas, they like to call it. Most of their issues are due to data from right after World War II, when we used a very crude form of phenoxyethanol for paint stripping, and it had lots of impurities such as phenol and dioxane and all sorts of monomers, dimers and trimers. It's a complex reaction. It sounds simple. Just put phenol in 1 mole of ethylene oxide and voila, you get phenoxyethanol. So let's go to one of the things that has caused one of the major problems, and that is Minnesota. Now, Minnesota is one of my favorite states. Many years ago, they passed a law prohibiting the use of mercury to preserve cosmetics sold in the state of Minnesota. I found out who was the author of the bill, and I wrote him an email along with the largest newspaper, congratulating him for making the citizens of Minnesota so much safer. And then I said, of course, you realize that we have not used mercury to preserve cosmetics since the early 70s, and that even if you wanted to use mercury to preserve cosmetics, there's no manufacturer of this anymore. So what's your next move to make the citizens safe? Prohibit Martians from driving on the right-hand side of the road on months that begin with Z? Sincerely, David Steinberg. About 2 seconds later, the newspaper called me back and saying, you're being facetious. I said, no, you're wrong. Why didn't you even challenge this guy that there is no use of mercury? Why is he introducing a bill? Well, it was populism. So what did they do next? They passed a bill in 2013 And this is a strange bill. What you do is they prohibit formaldehyde or formaldehyde releasers from any children's products, not just cosmetics, any children's products, as of August of 2014. Now, this is interesting because one of the major uses of formaldehyde is in permanent press fabric. And you'll be able to find formaldehyde, parts per million, 1 to 2 to 10 parts per million, in any permanent press fabric. I guess they're banned in Minnesota now for children. They define children as 8 years of age and younger. And in cosmetics, you cannot replace this with any chemical known or suspected of development toxicity, causes cancer, genetic damage, reproductive harm, disrupts the endocrine or hormone system, damages the nervous system, immune system, or causes systemic toxicity. What other crimes can be suspected of? The disappearance of Jimmy Hoffa? I don't know. This is just a shopping list of any type of thing. No proof is necessary. All you have to do is say suspected, and you can't use it. Well, that left us with real major problems. We didn't have answers for 2 different specific problems. We had answers for anhydrous products. They really don't need preservatives. Emulsions, we could use the caprylic glycol and probably be very safe in that respect. But what happens when we use surfactant-based products such as shampoos, body washes, and wipes? We suddenly found that nothing would work there because gram-negative bacteria would just grow like crazy. Also, what about the traces of formaldehyde we find in the fatty alcohols, which are the base for all of the surfactants? What about that? Well, here are the formaldehyde-releasing preservatives that they hate. There was imidazoladinylurea and diazoladinylurea, DMDM-hydantoin, Quaternion 15, sodium hydroxymethylglycinate. And then I listed the 3 which are rarely used, the methenamine, the 5-bromo-5-nitro-1,3-dioxane, and the 2-bromo-2-nitropropane-1,3-diol. We just don't use them very much. Well, they discovered that products were disappearing from the marketplace. So a year later, they revised the law. And this is really bizarre. If a chemical is intentionally added ingredient that degrades under normal conditions of temperature and pressure. Do we have cosmetics under pressure except for aerosols, which don't need preservatives? Don't understand that. To release free formaldehyde, it is prohibited if the level of free formaldehyde is above 0.05%. So we can use the formaldehyde releasers as long as we test for it, and I can show you methods to show that they don't release formaldehyde above 0.05%. because they didn't state any method for this. The law also bans triclosan for all products not approved by the FDA, which means the men in Minnesota, I guess, are not going to be able to use deodorants anymore. They're going to have to switch to antiperspirants. Well, I said we had trouble adequately preserving products. Well, people tried. And we've already had recalls of baby wipes and shampoo because of this contamination. Marketers have just said, we're not going to sell in Minnesota anymore. And who suffers? The consumers. Congratulations. Okay, the latest disaster, which most of you are aware of, are the organic or natural markets who subscribe to the theory that all preservatives are bad. The only ones they permit are very weak and usually very ineffective, and there are some that cannot be made from petrochemicals. If you want to meet the definition of the USDA for being organic certified, they have preservatives that are allowed, but they cannot be made from petrochemicals. There's only one problem. That's what they're made from. There are no natural sources of these. So what do we find when we look at these organic products? We start to find massive contaminations, usually coming from poor GMPs, but especially coming from spores from the raw materials. And what would you expect when they're grown with natural fertilizers? You can figure that one out for yourself. So what are we really using now? Let's forget all the issues we have. Let's find out what we really are preserving our products with. And I write the frequency of use every 4 years in that general time period to find out what they actually are. They're developed from the FDA's voluntary reporting list, but I also get the list from Canada because Canada has mandatory registration of the cosmetics. So their numbers are truly indicative of what the real facts are. So let's look at the most commonly used preservatives. Now, the number of formulations that these are based on for 2015 is about 150,000 products. So you can see Phenoxyethanol, and in 2010 it was around 85,000 products. So if you do the math, you can see Phenoxyethanol is the #1 used preservative. Caprylic glycol is the #2. It is frequently used together. The MCI-MI combination is very popular for shampoos and rinse-off products. The first paraben on the list is propylparaben. And then you find the soft preservatives, sorbic acid, benzoic acid, benzyl alcohol. These are all, quote, natural, but they're actually synthetic. This reflects the natural markets. Then we come down to methylparaben. And look at the drop in methylparaben use from 2010 to 2015. Dihydroacetic acid has grown, and other weak preservatives, and chlorophenicin continues to show some growth. I just got a notice I'm trying to read. Okay. I don't know where it is, so I'm not going to do it. Here are the rest of them. Butylparaben, methyl isothiazolone in 5 years has dropped in half. The formaldehyde releasers have dropped. The iodopropanol butylcarbamate is down to some degree. The isobutylparaben is down. Isobutylparaben's big use was in a mixture with methyl ethyl propyl butylparaben dissolved in phenoxyethanol. You're probably familiar with this combination. Triclosan has dropped. Quaternion 15 is almost off the map. So where is this leading us? It is leading us that paraben-free claims has caused a significant drop. The formaldehyde preservatives that release formaldehyde are disappearing. Phenoxyethanol and caprylic glycol, when used with an antifungal agent, these products are not antifungal, are now the most common used in emulsions. We're still going to use the methylchloroisothiazolone, methyl isothiazolone for rinse-off products, and the soft preservatives, sorbic, benzoic, dihydroacetic acid, are finding increased usage. And I think I have done this just at the right time. So I'll be glad to take any of your questions. There's a place somewhere where you click for questions and answers, and we'll see how many we can get through while we're have the time. We do have a stop at 10 o'clock. Any ones which I have not answered, you have my email address here. Be glad to answer them if you send me the email. So with that, I guess we now go to questions and answers.
Thank you, David, very much for that presentation. I'm just going to give our audience a few minutes and a reminder of how to submit their questions. Questions can be submitted by typing them in the green Q&A box, which is found by clicking on the green Q&A button at the lower left of the presentation window. And hopefully we're going to get those questions streaming in and David can answer them. Let's see. Our first question for David from Jeff at Abbott Laboratories. What do we use that is not on some list somewhere?
The answer to the question is, the answer to the question is something that marketing is not going to want to hear. And that is unit doses and aseptic packaging. That you manufacture your product to be used once and you manufacture it sterile, and that way you will never have to use a preservative. There isn't a preservative that isn't under attack in some sort of way, shape, or form.
Okay, interesting answer. Our next question from Jim at Dow Corning Corporation. Is the nappy area restriction specific to patient age or just general population?
Oh. Okay. The nappy area is strictly for children 3 years of age and younger, is what is being proposed for the European Union.
Okay, great. Thank you for those answers. I'm just looking in our Q&A column to see what we have next. We'll make sure our audience has time. There's a lot of information there. And our next question from Angelica at IPN Mexico. What do you think about potential microbial products as substitutes of chemical preservatives?
That's an interesting question. That's an interesting question. This has been something that's been published and started to grow some interest. That's put some sort of good bacteria that kill the bad bacteria. I have some problems with this. I'm not sure it's going to give us the real long-term needs that we have. We have some real interesting situations which no one really likes to talk about, but I have spoken about this because I think we all need to face the facts. Officially, we add preservatives to clean products to prevent contamination under normal and foreseeable consumer use. And this has been the gospel. I heard this when I took my first course in cosmetic chemistry in 1969. I have heard it as recently as last month's edition of the British Society of Cosmetic Chemists Journal. It's just not true. We've got to face the facts. The facts are we put preservatives into our product to prevent contaminations during manufacturing. Yes, we need to preserve them for consumer use, but I have never found an issue or a case in which regulatory action was taken because the consumer contaminated a product. If you look at all the recalls, and there are a lot of them, including the natural products and things like this, it is because the products were contaminated when they left the plant. Not before the consumers got their dirty hands and fingers in them. Now, there are certain things which we do know, and that is if you have wide-mouthed jars the consumer sticks their fingers in, that's more of a problem than putting it in a tube with a narrow orifice. And the one type of contamination that consumers really see that they cause is mold. They stick their fingers in, and the next day they open the jar and they see black fuzzy stuff, just like we do on the bread. But our major use of preservatives are during manufacturing. So there are several things you can do. If you're going to use the weaker preservatives, be sure you really tighten up your GMPs. Use HACCP. Find out where contamination is taking place. It increases your manufacturing costs. But if you can't use preservatives and you can't use active and strong preservatives, this is what you can do.
Thank you, David. Our next question from Bren at iOpen Outcomes. Can you recommend references for methods and costs for testing ingredients and formulated products for getting on the positive lists?
Yes, if you would like, if you drop me an email, I can give you a link. And if I don't have the link, I will just copy it, of the requirements for submission to get on the positive list of the European Union. It has been published, and I have the link, and I will be glad to send it over to you.
Thank you for that information, David. I don't see any more questions in our Q&A queue. I'm just going to give our audience another second to do that. It's sometimes a little slow coming in, but it's been some great information that you've had here today, David, and I think everybody's probably we learned a lot about, what's really going on with preservatives and what we put in the products we use. So I think we're going to wrap it up there. I don't see any more questions, but I do see that David's email is available. We'd like to thank David Steinberg again for joining us today, and our attendees for all their interesting questions. As I said, you have his contact information. If there's something we didn't get to today, I'm sure we can follow up with you. I want to let our audience know that the webcast can be viewed on demand through February of 2016, and LabRoots is going to alert all of you via email when it's available for replay. And we would encourage you to share this email with your colleagues who may have missed today's live event. Until next time, I'd like to thank David again for his time. David, do you have any final comments for us?
Yeah, keep the faith. We'll get through this.
Great. I see, actually, if you have a moment, David, we have one more question from Brent. And she tells us about anthropogenic chemicals are altering the microbial world, a session that's been in this event and has some useful information. So if you'd like to look at that, that will also be available for replay on LabRoots. Thank you again, David, for your time. Thank our audience. And that's all we have for today. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.